as your worship associate today. I also enjoy singing in the UUFM choir, which sings once a month. And we're always looking for new voices, so be sure to check us out if you can. I am serving as worship associate this morning alongside our minister, Reverend Diana McLean. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Mankato. All of you, whether joining us in person or on Zoom, are welcome in this time that we make sacred together. We extend an especially warm welcome to you if this is your first time attending one of our worship services. We appreciate that it can be difficult to cross the threshold of a new church for the first time, whether in person or online. Sunday morning is a team effort, and we are grateful for all of those who help make it happen. If you are attending by Zoom today, you are welcome to stay after the service to visit together. And for those attending in person, we have a luncheon in the fellowship hall afterwards. I hear there's lots of yummy egg bakes, and sweets. We acknowledge that our fellowship meets on the traditional homelands of the Dakota peoples. In continuing to understand our shared history, accepting responsibility for reparations, and building relationships in the here and now, we want to go beyond land acknowledgement as we seek to be good relatives. And we have just a couple of announcements this morning. The Rummage Sale Committee is looking for someone who can post valuable donated items online. And if you have such a talent and skill, please contact Nancy Cramlett, Karen Knox, or Deanne Nelson, with many thanks. And Reverend Diana will be leading a book discussion series about this year's UUA Common Read. Please see the weekly email for more details on that. And this Wednesday, as always on the third Wednesday of the month, hopefully there won't be a snowstorm or frigid weather, Reverend Diana will offer a half-hour contemplative worship service here in the sanctuary at 6:30 p.m. The service includes music, short readings, and silence, and all are welcome. Together, let us kindle a flame symbolizing our co-creation of sacred space at home and in this place made sacred by years of love. If you are with us on Zoom, please write in the chat that a chalice is lit on your street. And please say the words with me from the pew cards or on the slide. We are a welcoming people of diverse beliefs who commit to nourish the spirit, broaden the mind, nurture the earth, and build community. May this flame we kindle remind us to strive today and every day to love beyond belief.
Our call to worship this morning is "Come Into This Place" by Margaret Weiss. Come into this place with your whole self, the parts that are raw and exposed, the part that is beaming with joy, the part that is seeking the truth, the new, the possibility. Come into this place. Open your heart, lay down your burden, lift up your hope for something new to happen. Come into this place with fellow travelers on the journey, some faces new and others familiar, and all welcoming you here, now, to this moment. Come, let us worship together. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, number 361 in the gray hymnal and on the screen, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. Thank you, Nancy. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and sing hymn 356, Will You Seek in Far Off Places? And because this is not one of our most familiar hymns, Justin's going to play it all the way through once before we begin to sing. Last week, our worship service focused primarily on our monthly theme of joy in the context of joy as a form of resistance. Today, we're going to explore joy more broadly, reflecting on where joy's place is in our theology as Unitarian Universalists, particularly in this historical moment. How does our theology invite us to hold joy alongside pain and suffering in our world? The first thing that I thought of as I began writing this sermon is the Universalist side of our heritage, and specifically the idea of universal salvation, which was the cornerstone of that faith. Or put another way, the idea that no one is damned to eternal punishment. This is certainly one joyful part of our theological heritage. While early Universalists were still focused on the idea of heaven beyond this life, but believed in a sort of heretical way for their time that everyone gets there, modern Unitarian Universalist theology is more likely to focus on heaven as something we create on earth in this lifetime rather than in an afterlife, in the same way that we believe we can create hell on earth rather than in an afterlife. So if we are creating, or at least are invited to create, heaven in the here and now, I believe that requires both justice and joy. We create our version of heaven by creating a world in which all people are free and all are able to experience joy in their lives. I recently saw some information sent out from the Unitarian Universalist Association about a youth ministry curriculum called Deeper Joy, which caught my attention because of this month's theme. And here is what the materials said in a brief description of it. Deeper Joy is for those who are or want to be hopeful about the power of whole community engagement with young people at the center. Jenica Davis Hockett, who is the author of that Deeper Joy curriculum, had this to say. You've probably noticed the way play and joy nourish you and your community and leave you connected in new ways. Youth know this in their bones. In the late 90s and early 2000s, UU Youth created a compendium of community building and faith formation strategies centered in play and joy, and they called it Deep Fun. Now we're building on this legacy and calling it Deeper Joy. In your bones, too, you likely already know why we need something like Deeper Joy right now. You're probably already experiencing the longing or witnessing it in your communities. Now, more than ever, we need practical ways to thicken our connections for when the going gets tough. We need concrete practices that help us access that sense of divinity in each of us, that aliveness, depth, and joy. Deeper Joy is a map of community-building activities that help groups of any age and ability mingle, bond, stretch, heal, and repair. These are games with purpose. These are spirit lessons. The desire for belonging is universal. People of all ages, from the youngest to our eldest, want to know that they matter and that their contribution is important. And if we have more deeply joyful adults in our communities, if we have adults who are willing to learn from the strategies of our young people on how to build community, perhaps young people will be more likely to stay around when they transition from one life stage to another. The author invites us to explore deeper joy. She says, you might just find you like it and it is a fit for your community. Our faith tradition as Unitarian Universalists encourages us to look to many sources of wisdom and inspiration, both spiritual and secular. So the idea of a curriculum grounded in games is not too out there for us. Another source that I have turned to in recent years is the writings of Black women activists and leaders, both within and beyond our faith tradition, who have much to teach us about strength and joy. In 2017, a program from the Unitarian Universalist Association called The Promise and the Practice of Our Faith centered the voices of Black Unitarian Universalists in an effort to decenter whiteness. The worship packet that was created for that program included a reading called Black Joy by my colleague, Reverend Kimberly Quinn Johnson. That reading is too long to include the whole thing in today's service. It could be a sermon all by itself. But there is one part in particular that I wanted to share with you today. She says, I call it Black Joy because I am Black, and it is the joy that I have been familiar with my whole life. It is the joy that I have learned from Black people. It is the joy created through our collective healing, our laying down of burdens to be picked up and shared by our people, our community. This is not joy in spite of suffering, a mask put on to hide pain, an armor put on to push through pain. This is an embrace, holding and soothing us in our suffering. This black joy is joy created through our being together. This black joy reminds me that I am not alone, that I am held and carried forward by a power beyond what I can comprehend. I call it black joy, but I want to offer it to the extent that it is mine to offer to this faith. One of my gifts to Unitarian Universalism is the suggestion that joy is ours. We are the people who commit to justice, equity, and compassion. We are the people who aspire to world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We are the people who affirm our interdependence with each other and the universe itself. She says, I want to challenge Unitarian Universalism and Unitarian Universalists to claim joy. She continues, Unitarian Universalist joy will require a different way of imagining ourselves and a different way of being with each other. Claiming the possibility of Unitarian Universalist joy requires making space for surprise. Claiming the possibility of Unitarian Universalist joy requires slowing down to hear the talk of the drum, pausing to move to the rhythms of the drum. Unitarian Universalist joy requires opening to the possibility of the mystical encounter. Unitarian Universalist joy requires embodying this faith differently than many of us are accustomed to. I'm going to repeat that last line of hers. Unitarian Universalist joy requires embodying this faith differently than many of us are accustomed to. I think one of the things she is pointing to in that sentence is that we Unitarian Universalists can sometimes get stuck in our heads, in intellectual space, not always paying equal attention to our bodies and our spirits. But joy is not an intellectual exercise, something that we think. It is something that we feel, both in our bodies and in our spirits. To experience joy, Kimberly tells us, we need to be embodying our faith differently than many of us are accustomed to, and that includes literally having a more embodied, in the body experience. She named listening to the drums and moving to the rhythm of the drums as one example of embodied joy. Rebecca mentioned choir, and I believe singing is one of the best examples of embodiment that I can think of. If you remember back to this morning's opening hymn, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In, it's not only that the words of that hymn talk about joy and rejoicing, but that the tempo of the song literally physically energizes us, uplifts us. It is a physical invitation to joy, to enter this worship space in joy. There are many songs that I love and that make me feel joyful, but one that I wanted to mention at least briefly today is by a group of Black women singers, the Resistance Revival Chorus, which I commend their music to all of you. This particular song is called This Joy, and the first verse's lyrics are several repetitions of "This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me," followed by "The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away." And then the song is one of those zipper songs where it plugs in different words, so it's this joy that I have, this love that I have, this peace that I have. I'm probably forgetting a few, and then it circles back to joy again in the last verse. That idea that the world isn't what gave us joy and therefore the world can't take it away is a powerful theological truth that we can hold on to. Whether we believe individually that the joy we have comes from within us, or from each other as a gathered community, or from spirit, or however you name the holy, what is clear is that it is not dependent upon the material world. It is something that we can hold on to even through difficult times. I spoke last week and have spoken before about my learning journeys to the South to learn about the civil rights movement. And time again, I saw examples of people in our history who lived with joy, insisted upon joy, actually, even while facing very difficult situations. One example is the Freedom Singers on the Freedom Rider buses that went to the South and integrated public transportation. They sang joyful songs on those buses, even knowing that they faced potential violence. So holding on to a joy that doesn't come from that external world, that is part of our theology, is perhaps one of the ways to define the of this world version of heaven that we are seeking for ourselves and for all people. Author and activist Adrienne Marie Brown wrote in her book, Pleasure Activism: The Politics of Feeling Good, "True pleasure, joy, happiness, and satisfaction has been the force that helps us move beyond the constant struggle, that helps us live and generate futures beyond this dystopic present, futures worthy of our miraculous lives." She says, pleasure, embodied, connected pleasure, is one of the ways we know when we are free, that we are always free, that we always have the power to co-create the world. Pleasure, she tells us, helps us move through the times that are unfair, through grief and loneliness, through the terror of genocide, or days when the demands are just overwhelming. Pleasure heals the places where our hearts and spirits get wounded. Pleasure reminds us that even in the dark, we are alive. Brown listed joy, happiness, and satisfaction as her definition of true pleasure. That feels to me like a spectrum of pleasure with varying degrees of intensity, from the milder satisfaction to happiness, as we heard about in the Time for All Ages this morning, to the more exuberant joy. And so I'm going to invite us to have just a moment of interaction with someone sitting near you, and this is always optional. If somebody doesn't want to share, you do not have to. As someone in my life once said, it is not a share or die situation. But I have a few questions, and the invitation is to have a brief exchange with the person sitting close to you. So I'm going to read you the three questions all at once, because I've learned that trying to interject a question once you've gotten talking is a little harder. So I'm going to give you three questions, and then we'll come back together. The first is, what does it feel like? And I mean both emotionally, but also in your body. What does it feel like when you are satisfied? What does it feel like when you are happy? And what does it feel like when you are joyful? All right, so I'm going to just give you a few minutes to turn and say just a sentence or two to each other about those feelings. All right, I'm going to call us back together, and I have a few questions, and these are just for you to think about rather than going back into your pairs, but we'll take a moment on each of them. I was hearing some good embodied language floating this direction, so thank you for going with the prompts. So I wonder, did you notice a subtle or a dramatic shift with the thinking of each of those three feelings, satisfaction, happiness, or joy? How many felt a subtle shift, just by show of hands? And how many felt a more dramatic shift between them? Yeah. So I wonder, and this is a question for us to ponder today, but to maybe carry with us as we go forward in congregational life. What would it be like if we intentionally focused some of our energy, maybe even some of our spiritual practices, on feeling more joy? And I do think we sometimes do that. I think we have lots of joy together as a community. I think our luncheons are joyful, which we'll experience in a little bit. I think of some of the multi-generational activities that Macy leads. There's been art journaling, hikes, other kinds of art projects, and I think those have been joyful. Recently, I was at one of the multi-generational game nights, and that was certainly joyful. So I'm in no way implying that we don't already do joy together, but what would it be like if we put extra effort into that? I think of it a little bit as filling our tanks, that experiencing joy together can help us have the reserve of joy, of strength, of resilience that we need to go out into the wider world as it exists today, which can be challenging. And I wonder how it might change our days and our lives, both individually and collectively, if we intentionally focused on joy as often as possible. In an essay on pleasure as an organizing principle on a blog called Ribbon Farm, Tiago Forte wrote, "Embracing pleasure is paradoxically a little painful. Few ideas that I've discussed with people have received so much pushback, so much skepticism. I think we fear that we'll lose control, that we'll go off the deep end of self-gratification. It feels almost impossible to escape the moralistic framing of pain as somehow intrinsically good and pleasure bad. But," this article continues, "as writer and civil rights activist Audre Lorde put it, caring for ourselves is, quote, not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. It is worth asking who or what our suffering serves and whether that is an allegiance we want to continue. Self-preservation, according to this article, is an act of defiance in a world organized around pain. But you get to be part of the future you are creating. You don't have to be a casualty of the transformation you are seeking. Your freedom and pleasure are essential ingredients of the freedom and pleasure of the world. Your freedom and pleasure are essential ingredients of the freedom and pleasure of the world. Our joy helps create a more joyful world. For one thing, if we are focusing on joy and practicing joy, perhaps we give others permission to do the same who may be carrying those messages about joy being self-indulgent, or perhaps that in times as serious as these, how dare we focus on joy? I think that using our joy to work toward a more joyful world is the version of salvation, which really at its root just means healing, the salvation that our faith tradition calls us to be part of. Life is serious, yes, and none of what we have heard today is intended to discount that or to ignore anyone's pain. But serious need not mean without joy. May we be a joyful people, creating heaven in the here and now. Amen, and blessed be. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 100, I've Got Peace Like a River. We're just doing verses 1 through 3, so those will be on the screen. If you're in the hymnal, you just need to remember to stop after verse 3.
As Reverend Diana extinguishes the sanctuary chalice, please extinguish your chalice at home and say the words with me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
As we prepare to leave our time of shared worship and move toward our time of shared nourishment, may we seek joy, may we spread joy, and may we embody joy. May that be our practice and our prayer. I now invite you to turn toward each other for our singing benediction, blessing each other with these words, knowing that we are each a blessing to each other.